Hey there, fifth graders. Welcome back to part two in Unit 3. Today we're going to be talking about another equation, another formula that you're going to need to know when dealing with coordinate grids and when dealing with a line, and this is called midpoint. So midpoint means if I have 2 points on a line on a coordinate grid, we want to try to figure out where the exact middle of that line is. That's why they call it the midpoint. We're trying to find the middle of it. With this unit, we've been working a lot with algebra and formulas and equations and just learning how to use them. So we have this new formula right over here. You see some similar things like you did with slope of a line. You see that there's x1, x2. You kind of see some different variables in there. This may look very complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So we're going to dive in and we are going to have a little chance to work through this. Okay. Now, first thing I notice in this formula is that our answer is going to be a coordinate. All right. So we're going to come up with our final answer is going to be have an X number and a Y number. All right. So let's start plunking some numbers in here. All right. So our formula says to find the midpoint, the middle of this line, I'm going to take x of my first point plus x of my second point and then divide by 2. So let's just rewrite kind of with some of those numbers in there. So I'm going to call this point 1. I'm going to call this point 2. So if I take x of point 1, that would be negative 2. I'm going to add on x of my second point, which is 3. And whatever that gets, we're going to eventually divide by 2. Now, because this is addition, it doesn't matter which point you label 1 or 2, because with addition, it doesn't matter which order we do that. With the associative property, it doesn't matter which order we put it in. All right, so I did the first half. Kind of check, I got that one done. Now over here, I have y of 1. Well, y of 1 is also negative 2 plus y of 2. So my y number in my second point, which if I go over here is 2 divided by 2. Okay, so we've got our first step. I'm going to switch colors just so we can kind of see it. Switch over to purple. All right, now let's actually do some of the math. Well, negative 2 plus 3 would get me 1. I'm going to divide that by 2. Over here, negative 2 plus 2 is 0 divided by 2. All right, now we just have to actually do the dividing. All right, we added those top numbers. Now let's do the dividing. 1 divided by 2. If I can't figure that out, pull out a calculator. Well, 1 divided by 2 is going to be 0.5. So 0.5. All right. 0 divided by 2. If I had 0 things and I divided it by 2, I'm obviously going to get 0. So there's my final answer. The exact middle of this line is 0.5 as an x, which we see is right here. If here's 0, here's 1. 0.5 is kind of right in between there. And then it is the y number of 0. So if I kind of plot that point, which is right there, even just using my eyes, I can tell that that's a pretty close. That is the midpoint. That is the middle part of the line. So my final answer, what is the midpoint of this line? Well, the midpoint is this coordinate of 0.5 as my x number, 0 as my y number. Okay, so we just use that equation. All right, let's take a look at one more. All right, I've got a new line here. I have negative 2 and 4 as my first line. Let's use a little bit of green here. So I'm going to label this point 1. Doesn't matter which one I label 1 and which one I label 2. Here is point 2 at 3, negative 2. All right, so now let's start figuring out that formula. x1 plus x2 is negative 2 plus 3. Negative 2 plus 3. And eventually I'm going to divide that by 2. That's my first coordinate. Then I add the y's, 4 plus negative 2 over 2, and I'm on my way. All right. The next one, now I'm going to actually do my adding. Well, negative 2 plus 3 gets me 1 divided by 2. And then on the other side, 4 plus a negative 2. Whenever we add a negative number, it's the same as taking away. So I have 2 divided by 2. And then I actually just do my dividing. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So my midpoint, the middle part of this line, is 0.5 as an x and 1 as my y. So if I kind of plot it, 0.5 is kind of halfway in between those two big spots on my x. If I go up to 1 and I kind of put that point there, it looks like it is the midpoint. So always kind of check it right there. If you end up getting a coordinate down here that, let's say, is way up here, you know that's not the middle point or the midpoint. So even though this equation looks kind of scary, it looks kind of complex, you know what all of these things mean. All it is plunking in numbers and taking it one step at a time. Most mistakes you will make on this is if you try to do more than one step and try to do it all in your head. So go slow, double check your work, be careful of adding and subtracting those negatives. Make sure if you're you can always pull out a calculator if you want to just double check some of your work. But your final answers for this midpoint will be, in parentheses, will be 2 different points, an x point and a y point with a comma in between them. All right, so good luck. You're going to now go and work on some midpoint examples.